Thank you, Rabbi Silverstein. As always, again, I feel at home here in many, many ways. Um, and that task, which was mentioned, the idea of trying to go to the Makoros, to go to the sources, to help us feel, is not an easy task. And partly because we are human, and as time passes, we get used to things. The same messages that we hear each year cease to awaken us. Sometimes we need a new vantage point, and the Torah has endless facets, and we need to try to look from other facets in order to connect. Right? There's a Chazal that talks about the Rebbe Hayadorish Boche Umisnachem. That Rebbe every year would come to Megillas Eicha, and he would darshan it, and then he would cry, and then he would be consoled. Meaning, he would darshan Megillas Eicha to the point that he made the connection that he felt, and that itself is the nechama. Because just like if you have a skier who goes downhill and has an accident, when they come with the first aid, one of the first things they do is they poke something sharp into his foot. If he says, ouch, that's a good sign. His nervous system, his spinal cord, it's still connected. If he feels nothing, it's very dangerous. So Rebbe, by telling us he was dorish, boche, umisnachem, that he would seek out a way to try to feel. Now, the topic that I chose today may not seem the most appropriate for that task, and I'll explain why. We've all heard that during this time of Avelus on the Churban, on the Golus, that really, right, we're not supposed to just focus on our own personal tzaras, and even, right, in this halavai, we would do this, focus on the tzaras of the nation, of all Am Yisrael, but there's something else, that we're supposed to feel pain about the Tzaar Hashechina, about the Golus of the Shechina, of Hashem's presence, that yearns to be in the world with those words that he declared, V'shachanti b'socham, I want to dwell, b'soch kol echad ve'echad mimenu, I want to dwell among every single one of you. And that is not happening as it should in Golus. That is something that we're supposed to yearn for and to have a sense of empathy for the pain of the Shekhinah. Now, I don't know if you're like me. Every time I've heard something like that, saying, well, maybe in my next reincarnation, I'll get to that. Right now, I'm trying to feel something, so I'm going to read another Holocaust book and hopefully feel something, and that's all I can do, right? These things are obviously for great people. I heard somebody, he told me his father took him to see the Kloisenberger Rebbe on Tisha B'Av, and he saw such pouring of tears and crying about the Tzaar Hashechina, which is, again, combined with the Tzaar of Am Yisrael, as we'll see. But despite all that, I want to try to examine it a little bit. Many quotes about it. Let's start with one to the Sefer Kava Yosha. Kava Yosha is a Sefer Musar that was written in the 1700s. He says, Todir tzorich ha'odom lis'or b'leiv mar al golus hashechina. A person is constantly supposed to be awakening himself with a bitter heart about the golus, the exile of the Shechina. How could it be that a person won't take to heart, if he has some level of Yiras Elokim, that each place in the Torah where we talk about the Geula of Am Yisrael, we should think that is Laman Shchinas Kavodo. Because, as we'll see, the Shechina is linked to Am Yisrael. So to go that extra dimension, every time we're talking about Am Yisrael getting out of Golus, getting out of Tzaros, and getting to Geula, and he finishes with something mysterious. I'll leave it as homework. He says, V'kabola amitisi biyodi, it is a true Messiah that I have. Kol mi shebelibo todir tzar al Golus hashchina, a person who constantly has pain, anguish about the pain of the Shechina, zocha lekeser Torah. That person is one who merits the crown of Torah. So that's an interesting thing to think about, why that is something that brings the Keser of Torah. So that's the task that is put before us, and the task that, as I say, year after year, I think that's for the Yechidei Sgula, but let's try to see at least if we might be capable. Gedolei Yisrael have said throughout the generations that we're supposed to learn from things that happen in the world. We're supposed to learn from world events. We're supposed to learn from things we see that human beings do, whether it's the way two drunken Russians wished each other l'chaim, right, when they're sitting in a krechma someplace in Russia, whether it is a revolution that happens. All these different things are things that we're supposed to see and learn. There was a Rebbe in Chicago for many years, Reb Zelig Star, he was a Talmud of Slobodka. The end of his years, he came here to Yerushalayim, and someone who was a Talmud of his told me that he came into his apartment and he was sitting there with a newspaper. So he asked the Talmud, he said, Eliezer, tell me, what am I doing? He said, you're reading the newspaper. He says, no, I'm learning the newspaper, right? Which is, again, newspapers were different then, and he was different from us. Okay, this is not an advertisement for newspapers, etc. But let's try to look at something that we have in our kochos hanefesh that is hard to understand, but at least shows us something we can do. There have been a variety of major big sporting events in the world recently. Right now, there's what they call the World Cup in soccer. And these are games that people have been waiting for a long time. People spend tremendous amounts of money going there. And when people's teams win, so the exultation of millions of people is huge and even insane. Right? Mexico won a couple days ago, and 1 million people went out into Mexico City to celebrate. I forget how many people died, but that was the celebration. In America, for some reason, when a team wins, they like smash windows and burn down the city. If the team loses, they smash windows and burn down the city. But there's this intense feeling of connection to what's happening there. I saw a quote, a man said that now that the New York Knicks have won the championship, he can die happily, right? They said, now, I was able to see this happen and go. Now, it's a fascinating thing to examine. Why is this and how is this? The Stipler in Chai Olam writes that he thinks many people don't have a sense of kavod in their lives, meaning integral kavod that they feel there's something really worthwhile about them. There's something significant about them. So what you do by linking yourself to a sports team or to celebrity is you're able to create a linkage so much that you feel it. That their victory is your victory. You see some guys in their living room going, yes, we won. Who's we? You couldn't run a football field if you tried, right? Nothing. These players never talk to you. They don't know your name. And yet there's this sense of identification which is there. And the Tzaar, when there's a loss, believe it or not, a member of British Parliament sent out a message to cheer on the British team. She says, please, please fight your hardest to win, because our studies show that there's 60% less household violence if the team wins than if they lose. Meaning 60% more chance of men beating their wives, if the British team loses. So clearly the emotions that are going here inside people are very intense. So with all the explanations that are there, it shows us there is something inside our kochos hanefesh. We do have the ability to identify with something that is, so to speak, perhaps distanced from us, bigger than us, and to feel it as if it is us. So that at least opens the window to the fact that feeling tzar in something as great, perhaps even as the Shechina, or for Klal Yisrael, and to be sameach b'simchasam is, in certain ways, within reach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu certainly feels that for us. The Pasuk in Tehillim says, Imo anochi b'tzara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I am with you as a nation, and you as every individual Jew in your pain. When a Jew suffers, it says, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? Kalani miroshi, my head hurts, my arm hurts. And Shmos Rabbah, such a beautiful image by HaKadosh Baruch Hu appearing to Moshe Rabbeinu, B'lavas eish b'toch hasneh, in this flame of fire, in this bush, this thorn bush, and they say, Ma ta'omim halolu, twins. A fascinating phenomenon that people research all over the world, but Chazal stated, Im chashash echad berosho chavero margish. If one twin gets a migraine, the other twin feels it. He may not get the whole migraine, but he's aware of the migraine. I've spoken to people who are twins who affirm such phenomena. So says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, finishes the Medrash, Imo Anochi B'tzara. So that is certainly there. So now we see that there is Tzaar Hashechina. There's Tzaar Hashechina when Am Yisrael are in pain, and we have to see the roots of that, why that is that this should cause, so to speak, pain to the Shekhinah. What is one of the most deep pains that are described in the Nevi'im when it talks about the behavior of Am Yisrael that leads to Churban? Shikha, forgetting. Endless psukim. In the Torah, in Devarim, Ches Yud Aleph, Yishom Elocha pen tishkach as Hashem Elokecha. Don't forget Hashem. Devarim Ches, V'rom levavecha v'shachachta as Hashem Elokecha amotziach meretz Mitzrayim beis avodim. You will become haughty, you will forget Hashem. In Yirmiyahu, Hatishkach besula edyo kala kishorea. Will the young woman, the young bride, forget her jewelry and her hair pieces? Va'amish cheichuni, yomi mein mispar, my people forgot me for uncounted days. Yirmiyahu, kihevu as darkam, they corrupted their ways. Shochachu as Hashem Elokeim. Right? On and on. Yirmiyahu, kishcheichani ami, they forgot me. Hosea, va'ishkach Yisrael soseyu. On and on. Yechezkel, v'tibotzi re'ayich ba'oshek va'osi shachacht ne'um Hashem. Right? And Yeshayahu will finish with Ki shachacht elokei yishech v'tzur ma'ozech lo zachar. You forgot the God who redeemed you, who saved you, etc. Now, what type of forgetting is this? I think that unless perhaps during a period of extreme ignorance, Am Yisrael knew the story of what happened. They knew about Yetzias Mitzrayim. We don't have any record of times when Am Yisrael did not keep a Pesach Seder. So they knew the facts, but they forgot what the connection is between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, learning from the human condition. One of the most painful things a person has to go through sometime is when someone close to them, a spouse, a parent, grandparent, suffering from dementia, and they don't know who you are. You come in to visit them. It's your husband of 70 years, and he's smiling, and at some point he asks, who are you? Do you live here? And it hurts very much. If we imagine that Tzaar Hashechina, so to speak, and the images that are given in the Nevi'im, in the Kinnis, are there of parent to child? Are there of a wife yearning for her husband? Of all these things, if the Shikha takes that form, that who are you? Meaning, is there anything that connects us? Why are you sitting here in my hospital room? This level of shikha causes tremendous pain. And this, as we see from these psukim, is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes over and over and over again. This idea of shikha, this idea of forgetting. So, how is it, what form does the shikha take, and how are we supposed to get out of it? We know that the Chet HaMeraglim says that Am Yisrael cried, right? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Atem b'chisim b'chiyah shel chinam, you cried a crying that was for nothing, for naught, right? Ani ekbelchem, right? I'm going to set for you b'chiyah b'chol hadoros, that you're going to cry all the generations, and that is on Tisha B'Av. Now, it's too superficial to think that that's some type of punishment, right? Meaning that, first of all, any punishment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Reb Chaim Friedlander phrased it so nicely, it's always tikkun, it's never nekama. Hashem doesn't get revenge on us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tries to help us repair. Why was the bechiyah that they cried a bechiyah shel chinam? They were scared. They were scared. The Meraglim were very, very wise people. And they came and they reported that this is very dangerous. And they cried out of fear. Why is it Bechir Shel Chinam? Because if we think about the greater context of where they were surrounded by the Ananei Kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were part of the Am Yisrael that had come out of Mitzrayim, that had received the Torah, that had all of these things, and yet they didn't have emunah in that reality, and something else felt more real to them. That's why it was Bechir Shel Chinam. There was no reason to cry. If Hashem says go, then despite everything that's there, it'll be okay. They chose a different reality. The Bechir that we do every year in these 3 weeks, and especially on Tisha B'Av, is meant to work in the opposite direction. Moshe Shapiro said that Golus, when we go into Golus, we're going into a reality that is counter our health, our best interests, our nature. That's the idea of Golus. The reality which we're dependent on, whether it's a nation or a group of nations or a leader or even the culture and systems of the place that we're in, we become dependent on them. But they aren't the natural systems for the growth of a Jew. Like Rabbi Akiva said, right, that the fish, when the fox wanted the fish to come out of the water, said, Torah is our existence. It's our very existence. If we go up on the dry land, so we can't survive. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us into these situations, and there we have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is to, we call it Yiddish, to go along with it. Say, okay, when in Rome, do as Rome. This is our reality. This is who controls us. This is what we have to do to be able to survive and succeed. This is simply the way it is. Or that very existence in Golus can bring a person to say, wait, this isn't right. This isn't right for us. This isn't who we are or who we should be. We are given life and purpose and taken care of by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's that emunah. The opposite of forgetting. We're put into a situation that makes us forget, that's so extreme that we'll actually remember. Right? Again, it's a chutzpah question, but many people ask Moshe, if we weren't behaving nicely when we had a Beis HaMikdash, when we had a Sanhedrin, we had all these things, does really burning it down and throwing us out into the world among the goyim, is that really going to make it better? Is that helping? But that extreme situation is supposed to enable us to realize that even within Golus, we can create that world of emunah. We can enter that world of emunah. We can live in that world of emunah. And then we're not forgetting. Then we're remembering. And when we remember, then all the geula and all the Yeshua can come. That is what we have to try to be able to reverse. It's sad when a person can't come out of the reality that they're stuck in. Again, taking that example of this concept of dementia, which again is not an exact correlation because it's really a physical-based phenomenon that's happening, whereas the shikha of Am Yisrael and Golus is something that's coming more in terms of a spiritual sense. But a woman wrote a fascinating article. She said that her father had dementia, and for many years he was an administrator of a yeshiva. And he kept flipping back into the idea that he works for the yeshiva and getting all worked up about things that had to be done. And she said initially she would yell at him. She said, you don't work in the yeshiva anymore. 10 years you don't work in the yeshiva. Nothing you have to do. It's over. It's finished. And he would get upset and he would yell back and he would cry. And she said 1 year, he said to her, I have to do the mailing, the Rosh Hashanah mailing we have to send out. And she suddenly had this light bulb. She said, could I do it for you? He said, you know how? She said, yes. said, thank you. And she entered his reality instead of fighting it. And she actually created a whole course of teaching people to deal with things in that way. And sometimes it's not just for dementia, but for dealing with other people's realities. But Am Yisrael are not supposed to remain in a state of dementia. Am Yisrael, it's true, sometimes they really are in that world. The Nova yells at them, the Svarim yell at them, Gedol Yisrael through the generations yell at them, and they still remain locked in that world, in that other world, which is not the world of Emes, which is not the world that we can be in and that we flourish in. So the Tzaar of the Shechina comes because of that. What is the word Shechina? So many words to describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his relationship with us. And the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu represent different facets of that. We have no knowledge of what's called Atzmusa Yisbarach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's essence. The word Shechina comes very simply from what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said he wanted from the Mishkan. Its very root is thy word Shechina. V'shachanti b'socham. What Chazal describe as, in the Medrash it says that Nis'ava HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a taiva. He had a very strong desire, an intense desire, shilo dira b'tachtonim, that he should have a dwelling place in this lower world. That is the point that he revealed to us of this whole exercise. And there's a special promise that, so to speak, limits Kaviyachol, his ability to do that. Meaning, a person might say, I like to voice chutzpahdik questions, with all due respect, I have to worry about the Tzaar Hashechina. The Shechina can take care of itself. It can make everything better, right? Bring Mashiach tomorrow, right? Just fix it all up. The Shechina doesn't have to be in Tzaar. I don't have that toolbox. The Shechina does. So here the Beis HaLevi says a fascinating thing, a very important Beis HaLevi in Parshas Vayigash. He's explaining the pasuk that says, Altera Mirdo Mitzrayim, telling Yaakov Avinu, don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. I will go down with you to Mitzrayim. And I will bring you up, and it means also come up with you. Says the Beis HaLevi. He says, Bir Kavanas HaKosuv Dekan, an explanation of this pasuk, Bolo Avtocha Hagadola Shebechol Avtochos. The greatest promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us among all Avtochos, she had Nikra Shmo Al Yisrael, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is called upon Am Yisrael. What does that mean? The only way, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu does a nace against the Teva, which he does only under very limited circumstances, the only way he does it to bring people to recognize him is if it's there to save Am Yisrael, if it's there for Am Yisrael. Moshe pointed out that it was the name Hashem Tzavokos, right, which we like to say that way when we're from. Why? Is Hashem, what's Tzavokos? They tell a story about a very frum yeshiva guy who went out on a date with a very frum girl. So he asked her, what's her name? She said, my name's Batka. He says, my name's Kelikaku. But anyway, so you have, so this idea, Hashem Tzavokos, so he explained because the Tzavokos, which is us, the Tzava, army of Hashem, is part of the Shem, is part of that name of Hashem. It's one name, a name made up of the Shem Hashem and the name made up of us. And therefore, he says, if you go down to Mitzrayim, I go down to Mitzrayim. If I go up, if you go up, so I go up, and I only go up if you go up. He says it's like a mashal Chazal gave, right, about someone who had a key that he didn't want it to be lost, so he tied it onto a chain. So too HaKadosh Baruch Hu attached his name to us that we should never be lost. And he says this is bitochon gomer, this is a total promise, shelo yovdu chalilu, that Am Yisrael chalilu will never be lost. Right? And this is the great promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. So we have to know that by him making that promise, by him linking his ability to be shochen to us, by his ability to be revealed to the world through us, maybe we can understand a little bit the tzar of the Shekhinah that's there. And it's a tzar that comes out of love for us, because we were chosen to do that, to be able to do that. So Ritz Hashem, right, by being able to feel this, right, we should be able to zocher, to be misnachem, with the true nachama, nachmu ami, and kefil kiflayim, to be able to see all the Yeshuas, the prat bichlam. Right.